Welcome to Engedrian. If this is your first time listening, or even if you are returning, be sure to follow us on Facebook, X, formerly Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube for additional content, battle maps, and background details. We hope you are enjoying our adventure. Let's see what happens next. Having left Hespa and the great tree behind to return to the Feywild, the party touches down in Sane, where an enormous volcano appears to engulf the ruins. They spot some remaining potential structures and set off to explore them. Their initial assessment of a set of 3 different tunnels is perplexing. Case makes some additions to the map they started.
Case makes a cartography check. Rolls 8.
This makes very little sense to me, Umgurn. I will need more information to make a clear map and understand what we may be looking at.
He sighs and folds the parchment.
I think our best course of action is to begin with this tunnel on the left going north. Fodinus and Sister didn't hear anything there. If it's uninhabited and potentially securable, it would be good to know that in advance.
He nods and the party nods in agreement.
Let's let the ground familiars go first. They can negotiate the cracks and crevices better than any of us. Just telepathically connect. I don't want anyone blind in there.
The party gathers their things and prepares to enter the north-left entrance. Theophania removes and secures her cart to several trees and covers it in branches. As the party passes through the overgrown stone entrance, they enter a very long, somewhat straight tunnel heading north. The floor of the tunnel is a gray-green cobblestone, almost perfectly square, covered here and there in dust, debris, and broken stones. The walls are a combination of natural stone and collapsed stone.
This looks like a hallway or a road.
Fodinus stoops down and studies the stones.
Fodinus makes a survival check. Rolls 17.
Here and there, these stones have repetitive marks that look like horse hoof damage. So this was either a hallway for a centaur's house or a street. I favor the latter.
Theophania laughs from the back.
The party moves 30 feet into the entrance. Sister, Slipknot, Hestia, and Filigree search side rooms, make investigation checks. Roll 14, 8, 8, and 8.
15 paces into the entrance, the party encounters 2 rooms to either side, which Sister and Filigree survey as best they can. Slipknot and Hestia move ahead and look through the other side rooms, one just to the left, 4 arm spans, and the second one a good 10 arm spans ahead. Sister reports back nothing moving, but some old pots and pottery are present with distinct markings. Inacel and Malayge enter the pottery room for a more thorough search. Filigree, Hestia, and Slipknot don't seem to notice anything in particular. Theophania and Fodinus check out the room on the right, where Filigree slithers around. Umgurn joins Slipknot and Peace and Case to go to the room Hestia was slinking through.
The party make investigation checks. Roll 12, 9, 15, 16, 18, 19, and 8.
Inacel sees the pottery and other debris that Sister found, but is mostly taken by the walls, where some of them are smooth stone and others are collapsed cave stone, as if this room fell from above. Malayge notes that the floor, under hundreds of Isvarana of dirt and grime, is a complicated blue mosaic tile of several different shades. He sees the bones of a skeleton half exposed in the dirt and nods to Inacel, who turns to it. The pottery pieces, a combination of brown, green, yellow, and red stone and paint, bear distinctive marks with pictograms, possibly runes, and complicated patterns of tiny squares and triangles. Under some of the grime, Malayge finds a shard of very fine glass. As he studies it, the long end of the shard is suddenly covered in greenish blood. He looks up at Inacel, and she is holding her throat, which is gushing copious amounts of blood. Malayge drops the shard, which shatters into a fine powder.
Why did you drop that, little one? Did something scare you?
Inacel moves closer to Malayge, who looks up again and sees his friend unharmed and smiling.
Malayge makes a deception check versus Inacel's insight check. Rolls 21 versus 11.
It's nothing.
Inacel smiles and returns to the bones. He collects a large piece of pottery with better quality markings and heads out of the room. Inacel gathers the bones together and places them in a corner of the room. She is easily able to cover them with dirt and debris, as well as flowers, herbs, and some shiny stones. Theophania and Fodinus find one intact jar, which appears to have been made of metal, but is rusted and corroded beyond being of use or value. No markings are discernible. Among the fragments of a large broken stone plate, Theophania finds a rusty dagger with a metal handle. She picks it up, and when she turns it over, the blade is dripping fresh, warm blood. She looks up at Fodinas, who is falling backwards with dozens of stab wounds in his chest. She drops the dagger as Filigree slithers close to her in a small ball. She picks up the snake and moves towards Fodinas, who is standing quietly looking at the walls, unharmed. He points at the floor.
Fascinating tile work under all this mess. Could be stone or glass.
He clears away a bit of grime, revealing a deep crimson and purple pattern of polished tiles, and a skull rolls out from the debris.
Better get Inacel in here. She'll kill us if we don't let her inter any dead.
As if on cue, Inacel and Malaysia enter the room. Fodinas quietly points at the skull. The lizard folk moves quickly, interring the remains as she did in the other room.
Anything out of the ordinary in here?
Malaysia kicks a bit of debris, but carefully studies Fodinas and Theophania's faces. Theophania appears quite ashen. She smiles.
Theophania makes a deception check versus Malaysia's insight check. Rolls 2 versus 8.
No, nothing to speak of.
Malaysia frowns deeply, obviously aware of the centaur's lie and concerned that she may have experienced something similar to himself. The four of them return to the hallway and move up to the next set of rooms. Fodinas joins Umgurn with Slipknot. Malaysia and Inacel move into a room with Sister. Filigree slithers ahead to the left. Theophania remains firmly in the middle of the hallway with an arrow notched, visibly disturbed. Umgurn searches the room thoroughly and finds more pottery fragments, as well as another rusted metal jar. Some of the stones on the collapsed back wall are sharp and jutting into the room. He places a hand on the stones, which seem incredibly sharp. A slight twitch in his finger makes him pull his hand away. He looks down at both of his hands, and they are covered in blood.
Anything of note?
Fodinas scoops up Slipknot, who nuzzles his furry face. Umgurn turns quickly at the voice, startled. He looks down at his hands again, and they are clean and pale, as always.
That remains to be seen.
He picks up a piece of intact pottery and strides out of the room. They return to the hallway and move up to join the familiars in the next rooms. Case and Peace are in a room with Hestia that is mostly broken cave walls with a preserved floor. There is no pottery or bones to speak of. After scouting the corners and looking at the ceiling with nothing to speak of, Case turns to Peace to suggest they leave and sees the cat impaled on their own spear, stuck against the wall. Case draws his own spear and looks around quickly, making a quick circle.
What are you doing, Case?
Peace touches him on the shoulder and Case jumps. Peace is unharmed and standing next to him.
You were... I thought... Never mind. The sooner we are out of here, the better.
He guides the smaller cat out of the room and to the hallway between the two rooms that are being searched by the others. Case continues and enters a room on the left with Hestia. Peace, concerned but not wanting to stress out the bigger cat, joins Umgurn in a room to the right. Malaysia and Inacel with Sister search a room on the left which has a shattered wall on the north through which they can see and hear Fodinas and Theophania investigating with Filigree. Inacel watches them through the crack for a moment and continues searching. There is another skeleton here, which Inacel quickly buries per her usual methods. Malaysia examines some pottery and shards, but cannot find anything of interest. As they turn to leave, Inacel peeks through the broken wall again and sees Fodinas repeatedly stabbing Theophania in the chest. She screeches and rushes out into the hallway into the next room with her scimitar drawn and glowing. When she arrives, she finds the two of them quietly searching the room, several feet apart, unharmed.
Did you see something, Inacel?
Theophania moves closer as Fodinas turns to engage.
There is something very wrong with this place.
Inacel sheaths her scimitar and returns to the hallway. Having found nothing of interest, Fodinas and Theophania do the same. Case, Umgurn, and Peace join them, having found nothing else in their respective rooms.
The party make perception checks. Roll 20, 10, 20, 7, 13, 23, and 19.
Malaysia draws a deep breath, as if to speak, and Fodinas covers his mouth quickly. Case points ahead to the right. Theophania and Peace nod and open their arms to suggest everyone close in tight. Fodinas whispers in a barely audible tone.
The room ahead to the right. There is something in there. I hear chittering and scraping sounds.
Case nods. Theophania frowns deeply.
I think it's best if we move much more quietly.
Theophania then smiles quite broadly.
Theophania casts Pass Without Trace. The party receives plus 10 to stealth checks for 1 hour. The party makes stealth checks. Roll 33, 28, 29, 30, 19, 17, and 26.
With all flames extinguished, and Theophania and Inicel in the back, led by Malaysia and Peace through the darkness, the party moves ahead and to the left into an unoccupied room. Immediately, everyone noticed that this room is very different. Unlike the crushed small rooms with pottery and grime, this room has solid stone walls with metal struts and a lacquered wooden floor. Though rust and grime are still everywhere, the structure appears to have been more solid and better preserved. Still whispering, the party confers.
If the rooms we were just in used to be buildings or small dwellings, perhaps those were houses, and these are some sort of official buildings or wealthier homes.
Malaysia drops down and studies the floor in detail. Everyone nods, unsure, and examines the walls carefully.
The party make investigation checks. Rolls 12, 21, 1, 27, 10, 2, and 8.
The more intact room seems to hold no secrets for most of the party, but Inicel detects a slight difference in one of the walls, which has faded with time but is evident. Malaysia notices the same area and quickly finds a small metal pen, very rusted, that seems to be aligned with a crevice in the wall.
Fodinas, come check this for traps and see if you can open it.
Fodinas looks strangely at the pair and then moves closer. Once he is near it, it is more obvious.
Fodinas makes a traps check and attempts to open the door. Rolls 19 and 26.
Fodinas finds a spring mechanism, likely linked to a trap, and disconnects it. Once the door is safe, he uses his tools and dagger along with some correctly placed strength from Case to attempt to open it. Inicel pours a flask of oil over the mechanism, and Fodinas nods with an appreciative smile.
Case makes an athletics check. Rolls 17.
The door creaks only slightly as the oil has silenced the uncounted Isvarana of age. The door finally swings open. Inside is a chest that appears to be approximately 4 hands by 2 hands by 2 hands with a small silver key in the latch. The chest and key appear untouched by time. Fodinas removes it and places it on the ground. He looks at the group, smiles, and turns the key. The top of the chest opens, and the box expands to almost 3 times its normal size, with 24 cubicles inside, equally spaced.
This is just like Imicron's, I mean Helen's.
Malaysia drops down on his knees and peers inside. Similar to Callan's chest, which was destroyed when he opened the astral gateway, the cubbies contain a collection of items, though many fewer than Callan's. Platinum, gold, silver, and copper pieces fill 4 of the spaces, though the coins are very different from the coins of Pithilius. Another chamber has a mixture of small and large gems. The rest of the spaces contain mostly books, all of which appear pristine.
Malaysia makes an arcana check. Rolls 15.
These books are mostly chest books, but the chest must have preserved them. This one, however, is a magical text of some kind. I'm not sure, but I'll have to study it later.
Peace moves closer to the chest and pulls a few of the non-magical books out. They peruse a few pages and then pick up another.
Much of this is historical text or personal journals, we think. Best to keep them in this chest for now, as we are not sure what exposure to normal air will do.
Peace returns the books and looks into the other spaces. In the dark depths of one of the cubbies is a small glass sphere, a small figurine of a dog made of black stone, and a small nondescript bag. Peace points them out to Malaysia, whose eyes go quite wide.
Malaysia makes an arcana check. Rolls 16.
These are clearly magical items, though I'm not sure exactly what, like the book. This sphere is some sort of light source. This little dog probably does something interesting. Let's see what's in the bag.
Malaysia opens it carefully and reaches inside. He pulls out 11 small beans. He carefully replaces them.
Beans. I know there can be some dangerous magical beans, so I'll study these later.
He replaces all of the items and closes the lid. The chest shrinks back to its smaller size. Malaysia locks the chest and removes the key, and it vanishes. Just to be sure, he extends the key and turns it, and the chest reappears.
Excellent.
Malaysia pockets the key. Umgurn points to the other room, and everyone suddenly remembers the chittering and scraping to which Fodinas alerted them.
Malaysia receives a chest of the organized arcanist key.
Fodinas, can you see what you can see? Inicel, Sin's sister as well.
Umgurn turns towards the door with his scimitar in front of him. Sister emerges from Inicel's pocket and scurries across the floor. Inicel's eyes go pearly white.
Fodinas makes a stealth check. Rolls 26.
Fodinas slides into the darkness of the main tunnel and moves carefully along the east wall, moving north. Sister moves soundlessly directly into the room, crawls up a wall, and moves out over the ceiling, giving Inicel a full view of the darkness. Below Sister, there is a very large snake with an enlarged, slightly glowing brain. To either side of the snake, there are hundreds of rats squirming and writhing in a giant swarm, all with slightly glowing brains. Sister moves across the ceiling to an exit on the east wall, which narrowly connects to natural tunnels. Back in the room, she finds a second eastern exit to a similar cave system. She ends her exploration going across the ceiling to the second exit to the west, where Fodinus stands peering soundlessly at the rats and snake. Sister drops onto his shoulder and crawls behind his ear. Fodinus moves like an inky shadow back to the group. Sister scurries down his arm and into Inicel's hand.
Fodinus and Inicel make nature and insight checks. Roll 16 and 13, and then 5 and 19.
Having spent some time in seeking out the mind flayer from my past, I've learned a lot about them, and those are swarms of cranium rats. But that snake is something different. It has a similar glowing brain, but I've never heard of a mind flayer with a cranium snake.
Fodinus pauses in his whispering and looks at Inicel.
I suspect many of you have seen weird visions inside this tunnel. Know now that those creatures are the source of those visions. They are using their combined psionic powers to keep intruders out of this tunnel. The question is why and who do they follow?
Inicel drops to her knees, supporting her weight with her arm.
More worrisome is that they can certainly sense our minds here if they want to. That means they either know we are here and are setting a trap, or they don't know we are here and haven't alerted anything else that may be here with them.
She sighs and tilts her head to the left and then to the right. As the party continues quietly making a plan, Umgern suddenly turns to the group and points to his head.
Drow, where are you? I feel you are near, but something is smearing you out of my gaze. I hunger. Come to me, Pale One, and give yourself over as a sacrifice to my greatness. I sense you are not alone, but their thoughts are not perceptible to me. Perhaps my minions.
The party make wisdom saving throws DC 13. Roll 3, 27, 9, 7, 17, 25, and 15.
Umgern puts both his hands next to his head with his hands flat and moves them back and forth quickly. Fodinus, Case, and Malaysia look at him funny, but the remainder all clear their minds and do their best to shield their thoughts. After a few moments of complete silence, the undercommon voice returns to Umgern's mind.
Very clever, blood traitor. The shame of your people. A puppet of the surface dwellers. Most of your friends are a bit too gifted for my rats to read, but not all. The bugbear, a victim of a mind flayer. He is concerned there is another such creature here. Perhaps even the one who stole his mind. He reeks of fear and loathing. It is delicious. If I can torture him before I consume his flesh, it will be so much more delicious. The Catman, very alien to us. His mind is like an open book, but the pages are blank. Strength, food, love. It is a wonder he can speak. You choose to have this blithering idiot in your company, but for what purpose? It must be only to feed me. But the little firebrand, a genasi, a spellcaster of great talent, a brilliant mind, even revered by mind flayers, and too curious about everything. He didn't tell you about the armored beast he defeated in the tower. He wants to be so grown up, but he is always a child. Perhaps I will take him to the mind flayers intact so they can turn him to their kind. I see you are not even a worthy adversary, clumsy and too protective when you are weak and useless. We could end you and sup on your flesh and bones before you even draw your swords. Yes, I think it's time to eat.
Umgern breaks from the connection with sweat pouring from his brow. The others look at him cautiously.
There is no need for silence. Prepare to fight. Do not relent. They are the essence of evil. Now.
Umgern charges out of the door and across the hall, brandishing his scimitar. The others follow, with Fodinus, Case, and Peace going to the north door. Umgern twirls his scimitar in the growing light from Inacel's scimitar, revealing two massive swarms of rats around an enormous constrictor snake, all with exposed, glowing brains.
You are unclean and unholy beasts. We will end you now.
Everyone rolls for initiative. Theophania casts Hail of Thorns, attacks Cranium Constrictor with Longbow, Gemstalker Crystal twice. Hordebreaker to Swarm of Cranium Rats. Rolls 10 and 27 for 1 hit for 7 piercing damage plus 8 force damage. Teleports 1d8, rolls 7, Cranium Constrictor 30 feet west, into wall, takes 20 bludgeoning damage. Hail of Thorns rolls 2 piercing damage. Dex saving throws are 6, 8, and 19, 2 fails and 1 save. Hordebreaker rolls 27 versus AC 12 for 12 additional piercing damage.
Theophania clutches her bow tightly, causing the amethyst gem arrow she has notched to glow with green thorns. She launches an arrow at the constrictor, but it misses high as she is not used to the weight and explodes on the wall. She releases a second amethyst gem arrow, glowing with thorns, and strikes the constrictor in the neck. It hisses loudly as the gem explodes, and a hail of thorns spew from the arrow. One of the swarms is peppered by the thorns as well. The gem's teleportation power throws the constrictor far to the west, directly inside of a stone wall, which ejects it back into the room, heavily damaged by the force.
Inacel casts Flaming Sphere. Bonus action slams into Cranium Constrictor. Rolls 19 Dex save versus DC 15 for 5 fire damage.
Inacel produces a large diameter sphere of flame between the two swarms and the constrictor, and then rolls the sphere quickly into the large snake, singeing its flesh.
Cranium Rat Swarm A casts Confusion, 10-foot diameter, on Umgern, Malaysia, Inacel, and Theophania. Roll Wisdom saving throws DC 13 of 8, 3, 11, and 7, 4 fails.
The murmur of the swarm of rats nearest to them penetrates the minds of Umgern, Malaysia, Inacel, and Theophania, who become somewhat confused about the battle at hand.
Cranium Rat Swarm casts Confusion, 10-foot diameter, on Fodinus, Case, and Peace. Roll Wisdom saving throws, DC 13, of 13, 10, and 10. 1 save and 2 fails.
The other swarm of rats increase the tempo of their chittering, causing Peace and Case to also become confused, but Fodinus seems unaffected.
Fodinus moves into melee and attacks Cranium Constrictor, assassinates Surprise, Sneak, attacks Cranium Rat Swarm with Dagger. Rolls 26 versus AC 12 for a hit, critical, for 14 plus 24 Sneak plus 7 Surprise equals 45 total damage. Rolls 14 for 6 damage. Cranium Rat Swarm makes a concentration check, DC 10, rolls 19.
Fodinus, quickly noticing his confused colleagues, dashes into the room and up to the large constrictor snake, slashing it near the throat with his short sword and downing the beast in one blow. He turns towards the nearest rat swarm and hurls a dagger, slicing through several of the rats, but it does not stop their incessant chittering.
Peace rolls 1d10 to determine the effect of confusion, makes a wisdom saving throw. Rolls 5, no actions this turn, rolls 16, and saves.
Peace stands nearly perfectly still, doing nothing for a few seconds, and then shakes their head slightly and seems to come back to their senses.
Case rolls a 1d10 to determine the effect of confusion, moves to melee with Cranium Rat Swarm B, manifests Echo on the other side of the swarm, bonus action, makes 2 unarmed strike attacks, unleashes Echo twice, 4 total attacks, makes Wisdom saving throw DC 13. Rolls 10, normal action, rolls 24, 7, 9, and 28 for 41 total damage. Rolls 12, fails saving throw. Cranium Rat Swarm B makes concentration check, rolls 2. Peace and Case are no longer confused.
Case, momentarily unaffected by the chittering of the rats, rushes towards them, producing an echo of himself on the other side of the mass of glowing brain vermin. He takes 2 punches at the rats and unleashes the power of his echo to mirror his punches. As the blows land, dozens and dozens of rats snap, pop, and rupture from the blows. After crushing the swarm, it appears easier to hit. Case also feels his head clear and refocuses on the battle at hand.
Malaysia rolls 1d10 to determine the effect of confusion, makes a wisdom saving throw. Rolls 3, no actions this turn. Rolls 20, 1 save.
Malaysia looks around at the floor, walls, and ceiling, but seems uninterested in the rats ahead of him. He does nothing for a few seconds, and then blinks his eyes and refocuses on the glowing rodents.
Umgren rolls 1d10 to determine the effect of confusion, makes a wisdom saving throw. Rolls 3, no actions this turn. Rolls 21, 1 save.
Umgren drops his scimitar to his side and seems to watch blissfully as Case pounds on the mass of rats. He does nothing for a few seconds, and then suddenly pulls his scimitar back to his chest and glares at the rats.
Theophania rolls 1d10 to determine the effect of confusion. Casts Hunter's Mark on Cranium Rats A. Attacks twice with Green Dragon Breath Arrow and Red Dragon Breath Arrow. Rolls Wisdom Saving Throw. Rolls 10, normal actions. Rolls 24 versus AC 12 for 7 piercing damage, plus 26 poison damage, and 2 Hunter's Mark damage. And rolls 20 for 7 piercing damage, plus 9 fire damage, and 5 Hunter's Mark damage. Rolls 15, Wisdom Saving Throw, 1 save. Cranium Rat Swarm A makes concentration check, DC 10, rolls 10.
Theophania appears to ignore the murmur of the rat swarm and grasps her bow handle tightly, causing a red halo to form over the swarm. She launches 2 arrows at the mass, one with a green dragon breath pouch and a second with a red dragon breath pouch, striking with both. A cloud of poisonous gas engulfs the rats and a blast of fire burns them. As their chittering turns to screams, she seems to focus on the battle at hand.
Inacel rolls 1d10 to determine effect of confusion, makes a wisdom saving throw. Rolls 6, no actions this turn. Rolls 16, 1 save.
Inacel, who was holding her glowing scimitar high, lets the sword wink out and begins studying the laces on Umgern's boots. She does nothing for a few seconds, and then suddenly thrusts her scimitar back into the air where it glows brightly.
Cranium Rat B attacks Case with Bite Attack. Rolls 6, critical. Takes 6 damage from biting self.
The swarm of rats between Case and his echo attempts to sink many sets of teeth into Case's furry flesh, but instead, punch-drunk from his attack, bite each other.
Cranium Rat Swarm A moves into melee with Case and Fodinus, attacks Fodinus with Bite Attack. Rolls 21 versus AC 18 for 7 piercing damage, plus 20 psychic damage. Fodinus uses Uncanny Dodge, having the damage, takes 14.
The second swarm moves as a scurrying mass to engage Fodinus and Case, focusing its gnashing teeth on Fodinus's dark skin. The tiny rat mouths tear into his flesh and unleash a barrage of psychic energy, but Fodinus ducks and weaves away from most of the swarm.
Fodinus makes 1 short sword attack on Cranium Rat Swarm A, Sneak, and a second attack on Cranium Rat Swarm B. Rolls 22 for 10 piercing damage, plus 10 sneak attack damage, and rolls 24 for 4 piercing damage.
Fodinus, his arms and legs stinging with pain from the barrage of bites, and his mind abuzz from the mental onslaught, slashes wildly at the mass of rats, cutting through the heart of it and leaving a pile of bloody, broken rodents collapsed on the floor. He turns to the other swarm and slashes them for good measure.
Peace makes a ranged spear attack at Cranium Rat Swarm B, rolls 23 for 9 piercing damage.
Free of the fog of confusion manifested by the rats, Peace hurls their spear right into the heart of the swarm, impaling a dozen or more rats into the wall and dispersing the rest into a pile of bloody pulp.
The party receives 600 experience points. Malaysia makes nature checks assisted by Inacel Advantage. Rolls 26. Case, Fodinus, Theophania, Peace, and Umgern make investigation checks. Roll 15, 6, 11, 7, and 11.
Well, this giant snakeskin is excellent for making interesting leather armor or boots or clothes or bags. I'll definitely collect this with Fodinus's help. The brains of these things are also valuable to arcane artists. I'll see how many of them we can save.
Malaysia goes to work with Fodinus, who has recovered his dagger, on the collection. Case notices a similar change in the west wall to the last chamber and calls over Peace and Theophania to look at it with him. Together they find a similar door with a small metal rod.
Fodinus found a trap before, so probably best to let him take a look.
While they wait for Fodinus to finish his harvesting with Malaysia, Inacel and Peace explore the eastern tunnel to the south. The passage is narrow, but when they squeeze in, they can see that the tunnel opens into a large, convoluted natural tunnel. Reflective sparkles off of crystalline structures in the walls are evident in the light of Inasel's torch. Case and Umgren move to the eastern tunnel to the north, leading from the room, and find a similar narrow passage to larger tunnels. After half an hour, Malaysia stores the large snakeskin and brains in his chest of preserving.
Malaysia receives 1 large snakeskin, 10 pounds, 60 gold pieces, 1 large brain, 5 pounds, 10 gold pieces, and 18 small brains, 5 pounds, 36 gold pieces.
Fodinus moves over to the wall area that Case identified. The appearance is similar to the prior.
Seems like, to me, this was a common secret storage cabinet when these buildings were constructed. I wonder if they had some sort of arcane lock before that has diminished.
Malaysia steps forward next to Fodinus.
Malaysia makes an Arcana check, Fodinus makes a Traps check and a Thieves' Tools check. Rolls 13, and then rolls 11, critical fail, and 22.
There's a very low level of arcane residue on this chamber, but nothing specific.
Malaysia turns to Fodinus and nods. Fodinus carefully checks the door mechanism for traps and finds none. He begins picking the mechanism and easily opens it. As the door swings on its hinges, a cloud of gas erupts from the doorframe, surrounding Fodinus, Malaysia, and Theophania.
Malaysia, Theophania, and Fodinus make con saving throws DC 15. Roll 8, 25, 10. Gas trap deals 3d8 poison damage, 11, 1/2 on save, 1 save, and 2 fails. Theophania and Fodinus are poisoned.
Malaysia seems to hold his breath at exactly the right time, avoiding being poisoned by the noxious fumes, but still feels his skin burning. Theophania and Fodinus cough and sputter from the blast of toxic gas. As they recover and the air clears, 2 gleaming eyes sparkle inside of the box, and suddenly a skull illuminates with bright flames. 2 rays of fire erupt from its eyes towards Fodinus and Malaysia.
Flame Skull makes surprise attacks with fire rays at Fodinus and Malaysia. Rolls 23 and 12, hitting Fodinus for 11 fire damage and missing Malaysia. Fodinus uses Uncanny Dodge, taking only 6 fire damage.
The first ray strikes Fodinus in the shoulder as he ducks out of the way, searing his back. Malaysia ducks as well, causing the ray of fire to flash over his head.
Everyone rolls for initiative.
The gas explosion was noisy, along with the coughing of Fodinus and Theophania, drawing the attention of the entire group.
Inacel moves 30 feet back into the room, casts Healing Word on Fodinus. Fodinus gains 9 hit points.
Inacel rushes back into the room and quickly sees that Fodinus is struggling, grasping at his back and coughing. She utters a few words and he is surrounded by a greenish-yellow light and seems to calm.
Fodinus makes 2 short sword attacks, Sneak, against Flame Skull, disadvantage. Rolls 22 for 12 piercing damage and 16 sneak attack damage, and rolls 15 for 5 piercing damage, for a total of 33 damage. Flame Skull takes 17 resistance to piercing.
Struggling with his cough and the pain in his back, Fodinus makes half-hearted thrusts at the flaming skull, which is still inside the box, making it somewhat easier to hit. However, his piercing lunges seem to scrape and slide off the skull with limited damage.
Umgren moves 30 feet back into the room and casts Guiding Bolt at Flame Skull. Rolls 26 critical for 32 radiant damage.
Umgren dashes back towards the coughing of his colleagues and sees the unholy visage of the flaming skull in the box. He grabs his amulet, makes a swirling motion with his hand, and utters several sacred words, causing a bolt of radiance to erupt from his hand and engulf the skull. Its flames immediately extinguish, and it collapses to the bottom of the box. Without a word, Umgren removes some powdered silver from his bag, sprinkles it over the skull, and pours water from his water skin while motioning and praying on the flowing water. The skull seems to shudder lightly and then lies still in the dust.
Fodinus, Inacel, and Umgren receive 400 experience points each. Malaysia makes an Arcana check, rolls 16.
Without a word, Malaysia collects a grayish-green ash from around the skull into a small fold of oilcloth and tucks it in his belt. He removes the skull and places it inside his bag of holding. Once the skull is gone, there is a leather-bound journal at the back. Malaysia removes it and hands it to Peace, who has joined the group. They thumb through it and smile.
Whoever the spellcaster was that became that creature, this appears to be his journal. We will peruse it later.
Peace tucks it into their bag of holding. Inicel moves closer to Malaysia, Theophania, and Fodinas and hands them each a potion of healing. Umgurn places his hands on Fodinas' back and Theophania's shoulder.
Malaysia and Theophania use a potion of healing, restoring 6 and 7 hit points. Fodinas uses a potion of greater healing for 12 hit points. Umgurn lays on hands for Fodinas and Theophania. Fodinas and Theophania are no longer poisoned.
I could use a brief rest. There is a room across the tunnel that is small with only one door.
Malaysia and Umgurn nod to Fodinas' sentiment and move the party across to the other room. It is very similar to the previous 2 large rooms.
Malaysia casts Alarm as a ritual in front of the entrance to the small room, which covers the full width of the tunnel. Random encounter roll D100, 20% chance, rolls 92.
After Malaysia's alarm is set, which he chose to manifest as a ping in his head, the party arranges themselves for a short rest and begins pulling out food. Within a few minutes of the calm of their safe encampment settling in, Malaysia hears the ping in his head, jumps up, and waves silently to the party, pointing towards the door. Before he can even get everyone's attention, they are all staring out into the tunnel, where a sudden bright orange light is glowing. A sudden roar, which sounds like a fire blazing draconic words, rings out, and the party hears creatures rushing the door.
Everyone rolls for initiative. Inicel moves into melee with Fire Newt Warrior E and H, attacks Fire Newt Warrior H with Scimitar and Hungry Jaws, rolls 10 for a miss and 16 for a hit for 3 piercing damage, gains 3 temporary hit points.
Inicel rushes from the room, scimitar drawn, and slashes at the first orange lizard-like creature she reaches, missing with her crystal scimitar, but following her swing with a gnash of her jaws onto the creature's arm, sinking her teeth in deep.
Fodinas moves into melee with Fire Newt Warrior C and E, attacks Fire Newt Warrior C, Assassinate, Sneak, Surprise, with Short Sword, second swing at Fire Newt Warrior E, rolls 19 for a hit for 54 piercing damage, and rolls 26 for a hit for 4 piercing damage.
Fodinas follows Inicel with both short swords drawn and engages 2 fiery lizards, piercing the first through the heart and decapitating it on his upswing. The second receives a deep wound to its thigh.
Malaysia moves to just outside the door, casts Scorching Ray, spends 1 sorcery point to change the damage type to Cold, transmuted spell, attacks Fire Newt Warrior A, E, and G, rolls 27 critical for 12 cold damage, rolls 10 for a miss, and rolls 13 for a hit for 5 cold damage.
Malaysia, moving just outside the door, sees the 8 fiery orange lizard creatures carrying weapons and assumes his fire magic would likely be of no use. He makes a series of motions with his hands, utters a fiery arcane word, and channels his metamagic to launch 3 rays of cold at 3 of the beasts, striking 2 of them and missing 1. They recoil with pain. He screams,
No fire!
Theophania moves just in front of Malaysia, out of melee, casts Hunter's Mark on Fire Newt Warrior B, and attacks twice with her longbow. Rolls 24 for a hit for 11 piercing damage and 3 Hunter's Mark damage. Rolls 11 for a miss.
Theophania moves out of the secure room and stops next to Malaysia, clutches her bow, causing a red halo to appear over the furthest fiery lizard, and launches 2 arrows directly at it, one of which pierces his chest and the second slams into its shield.
Fire Newt Warrior D moves into melee with Fodinas, spits fire, DC 11 dexterity save. Fodinas rolls 10, uses Uncanny Dodge, rolls 9 fire damage, takes 5.
One of the lizards runs close to Fodinas and blasts him with a breath of fire, which he barely avoids, still getting burned.
Fire Newt Warrior E spits fire, DC 11 dexterity. Fodinas rolls 26, rolls 6 damage, takes 3.
The other lizard next to Fodinas also blasts him with a breath of fire, which he barely avoids, again getting burned.
Fire Newt Warrior B moves into melee with Fodinas, spits fire, DC 11 dexterity saving throw. Fodinas rolls 14, rolls 9 fire damage, takes 5.
One of the lizards runs close to Fodinas and blasts him with more breath of fire, which he barely avoids, still getting burned.
Fire Newt Warrior G moves into melee with Theophania, spits fire, DC 11 dexterity saving throw. Theophania rolls 13, rolls 16 fire damage, takes 8.
Another fiery lizard moves towards Theophania and engulfs her in a blast of fiery breath that she dodges but still feels the heat.
Peace moves into melee with Fire Newt Warrior F, shoves it, strength versus strength. Rolled 17 versus 15, pushes it 5 feet back.
Peace charges from the room into the fray and notes the fire lizards surrounding Fodinas. They rush into melee and push the closest lizard with a hard shove, sending them reeling back 5 feet. Peace readies their spear.
Case uses full movement to enter melee with Fire Newt Warrior G. Bonus action manifests Echo behind Fire Newt's E and F. Attacks Fire Newt Warrior G with 2 punches, unleashes Echo to attack Fire Newt Warrior F with 2 punches. Rolls 16 for 9 bludgeoning damage, 22 for 10 bludgeoning damage, and 12 for a miss, and 13 for 6 bludgeoning damage.
Case joins the fray, moving out of the room, past his colleagues, and engaging one of the lizards. He bumps his fists together, and a gray, misty form of himself appears behind the lizard that Peace just pushed. He unleashes 2 solid punches to the lizard in front of him, and his Echo swings at one of the lizards in front of it, but only strikes it once.
Fire Newt Warrior F spits fire at Case's Echo, DC 11 Dex save. Rolls 12 fire damage. Echo rolls 14 saves, takes 6 fire damage, and vanishes.
The lizard is surprised by the blow from the misty form and spits fire at it instinctively, causing it to vanish immediately.
Fire Newt Warrior H moves into melee with NSL and Case, spits fire at Case, DC 11 Dex save. Rolls 14 fire damage. Case rolls 16, takes 7 damage.
The lizard closest to NSL moves closer to engage NSL in Case and spits fire at Case, singeing his fur on his arms.
Umgurn moves into melee with Fire Newt Warrior E, F, and H, casts Word of Radiance, DC 14 con saving throw, rolls 8 radiant damage. Fire Newts roll 16, 20, and 16, 3 saves.
Umgurn fears for his friends and dashes into the group, moving to the line with 3 fiery lizards in front of him. He utters holy, arcane words, and radiant a light erupts from him. However, the light seems to have no effect on the already orange and glowing lizards.
Fire Newt Warrior A moves into melee with Umgurn, spits fire, DC 11 dexterity saving throw, rolls 13 fire damage. Umgurn rolls 14, takes 7 damage.
The last lizard moves around its glowing troop to engage Umgurn, spitting a ball of fire at him, which Umgurn dodges somewhat, but still feels the burn of the glowing saliva.
NSL attacks Fire Newt Warrior G with Scimitar and Fire Newt Warrior H with Hungry Jaws. Rolls 13 versus AC 13 for a hit for 6 slashing damage, and rolls 18 versus AC 13 for 6 piercing damage, gains 6 temporary hit points.
NSL slashes at the closest fire lizard, opening its throat and dropping it dead. She turns to the next closest and sinks her teeth into its shoulder.
Fodinas attacks Fire Newt Warrior B with 2 short sword attacks, rolls 29 critical for 9 piercing damage, and 10 critical for a miss.
Fodinas thrusts his short sword at the nearest lizard, piercing its shoulder with his first blow, but stabbing into his shield with the second blow. His sword becomes stuck in the shield and then falls to the ground.
Malage casts Scorching Ray, spends 1 sorcery point to change the damage to cold, transmuted spell, attacks Fire Newt Warriors B, D, and H, rolls 25 for 7 cold damage, 27 critical for 17 cold damage, and 21 for 10 cold damage.
Malage again makes a series of motions with his hands, utters fiery arcane words, and channels his metamagic to launch 3 rays of coals at 3 of the beasts, striking all 3 of them and killing 1. They recoil with pain.
Theophania casts Hail of Thorns, attacks Fire Newt Warrior E twice with Longbow, uses Hordebreaker on Fire Newt Warrior D and F, rolls 20 for 8 piercing damage, 3 damage from Thorns, Dex saving throws of 15, 12, and 7 for DC 16. Hordebreaker D rolls 11 for a miss. Second attack on E rolls 12 for a miss. Hordebreaker on F rolls 25 for 5 piercing damage.
Theophania draws an arrow and squeezes her longbow handle, encircling the arrow in glowing thorns. She scores a hit with the arrow into the fiery lizard that Peace shoved, and a rain of thorns pelt the 2 lizards next to it. She quickly fires a second arrow at the lizard to the left, but misses. She draws a third arrow and launches it at the middle lizard, but it misses wide. She draws a last arrow at the lizard on the right and strikes it in the shoulder.
Fire Newt Warrior D attacks Fodinas with 2 scimitar attacks, rolls 19 for a hit for 7 slashing damage, and 7 for a miss.
One of the lizards that was just showered in magical thorns slashes at Fodinas with its scimitar, slicing him across the arm on the first pass, but tripping on Fodinas' short sword on the ground, missing on the second swipe.
Fire Newt Warrior E attacks Umgurn with 2 scimitar attacks, rolls 18 and 14, both missing.
The lizard that took the brunt of Theophania's arrows slashes at Umgurn with its own scimitar, but Umgurn's own natural parries with his blade deflect both blows.
Peace moves into melee with Fire Newt D and E, makes 2 cat claw attacks on Fire Newt Warrior D, spends 1 key point for Fury of Blows on Fire Newt Warrior E, rolls 19 and 12 for 1 hit for 7 slashing damage, and rolls 8 and 16 for 1 hit for 7 slashing damage.
Peace moves closer to the arrow-riddled lizards and slashes with their claws at 2 of them, landing a single blow on each of them. The first lizard squeals and collapses.
Case makes a 2-handed spear attack on Fire Newt Warrior H, rolls 21 for a hit for 12 piercing damage.
Case grabs his spear in both hands and rushes the nearest lizard, skewering it through the heart and dropping it to the floor.
Fire Newt Warrior F attacks Umgurn with 2 scimitar attacks, rolls 4 critical fail and 12, both misses.
One of the fiery lizards in front of Umgurn slashes with its scimitar. The first swipe is off-balanced and cuts into its fellow fire lizard's leg. The second, distracted by the offense, clangs against Umgurn's own scimitar.
Umgurn attacks Fire Newt Warrior E with double-bladed scimitar twice, rolls 16 versus AC 13 for 8 slashing damage, and rolls 12 for a miss.
Umgurn twirls his scimitar and lands a solid hit into the fiery lizard's shoulder on his left. As he pulls back to make a backhand swing with the double blade, the shoulder wound spews copious blood as the creature collapses away, dead.
Fire Newt Warrior A moves into melee with Inacel, attacks twice with scimitar, rolls 19 and 19, both misses.
The last lizard that spit fire at Umgurn charges towards Inacel, swinging its scimitar aggressively. Both passes come extremely close to Inacel's neck, but she darts away from the first and deflects the second with her shield.
Inacel attacks Fire Newt Warrior A with scimitar and hungry jaws, rolls 11 for a miss and 22 for a hit for 7 piercing damage, gains 7 temporary hit points.
With the scimitar blade swipes so close to her throat, Inacel responds with a hard slash of her own, which the fiery lizard deflects, but in doing so, opens his stance, allowing her to sink her teeth into its shoulder.
Vodinus moves into melee with Fire Newt Warrior F, attacks with short sword and dagger, sneak, rolls 10 critical 1 and 22 for 2 piercing damage and 7 sneak attack damage.
Vodinus moves around Peace to a flanking position with the fiery lizard attacking Umgurn and makes a hard stab at the creature's back. But the agile lizard turns suddenly, and Vodinus' short sword is buried in the lizard's shield, flung out of Vodinus' grasp. He thrusts his offhand dagger into the lizard's belly.
Malage uses Wand of Magic Missiles, 2 charges, 4 darts, with 2 each at the remaining Fire Newt warriors.
Malage sees the last 2 fiery lizards faltering, their heat dissipating and their energy failing with their blood loss. He raises his Wand of Magic Missiles and hits each creature with 2 glowing darts. Both fall where they stand, dead.
The party receives 200 experience points each. Theophania makes a medicine check, rolls 11, DC 10.
These fiery lizards possess a mucus on their skin which alchemists often use. I think we should collect it.
Inacel pulls 2 empty flasks from her bag and assists her in gathering the mucus. When it is collected and the flasks sealed, Malage puts them in his chest of preserving.
Malage receives 2 flasks, equivalent of 8 vials, of Fire Newt Warrior mucus, 16 gold pieces.
Inacel looks deeply saddened by the fallen bodies of her fellow lizards, and small tears flow down her scaly face. Theophania pats her on the back gently, and Inacel turns to the centaur, embraces her, and sobs for many minutes. Case, Vodinus, and Umgurn begin stripping the bodies of equipment and placing them in repose to the side for Inacel to inter.
Malage makes a smith's tools check, rolls 13.
Malage inspects the kite shields of the lizards and takes 4 of them into the side room where they had hoped to rest. After a few moments, the party hears him banging and clanging away. Vodinus takes the 8 chain shirts and places them in his bag of holding. He recovers his short swords from where they have fallen. Case and Peace inspect the scimitars and find them to be fairly mundane and of little value to keep. They place a scimitar on the chest of each lizard and fold his arms over it. The lizards have only 16 gold pieces, 47 silver pieces, and 51 copper pieces among them in total. They also have various trinkets, including a bundle of burnt, wet twigs, a pouch of sulfuric ash, a carved charcoal ball, and a necklace of linked colored lizard scales. They decide to leave the small items with the bodies onto which they were found. Vodinus takes the remaining 4 kite shields into the room with Malage. Malage looks up from his work.
I am making a door for this room. Should be pretty secure. Will allow us to rest safely, I hope.
He smiles and stands up a large, door-like sheet of shields held together with rope and bolts. Malaysia moves it over to the entrance to the room, and the door awkwardly covers the space and fits relatively well.
We can use the other shields to secure it by jamming them into the space on either side.
Fodinas nods. Thank you for visiting Engedrian. Don't forget to find us on Facebook, X, formerly Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube for additional content, battle maps, and background details. We hope you're enjoying our adventure. We can't wait to hear what happens next.